To order, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any changes or revisions to the regular or consent agendas?
I'll move to approve the regular and consent agendas.
I'll second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries. Sorry. Recognitions and information. Mrs. Gardner, do you have someone you would like to introduce?
Courtney Weddle. I would like to welcome her to our middle school as a math teacher. She has 3 years of teaching experience, and she has her degree from Purdue University, so she fits right in. She's filling in for us for a maternity leave, so we welcome her. She's already had some roles in the school, so welcome to Courtney.
Good. Welcome. Thank you. And we have Mr. Rounds.
You ready? Is it up there?
Yeah, ready to go.
Oh, all right. So I talked about this earlier this year with you guys, and everybody's here, so how about this? You can see. So we, I think a couple years ago, we were what's called a Purple Star School, and I saw this. Dr. Jenner sends out a newsletter every month, and I was reading through it, and this caught my eye as a veteran myself. And I was like, are we doing this? And it didn't look like we were. I went to Mrs. Gardner, said, I'd like to pick this up, and then went to the other principals and started to look at it. I wanted to do it as a school corporation. Unfortunately, we couldn't do it that way, so I had to do it for each individual school, but I was happy to get the recognition for all the schools. So, high school, middle school, Fillmore, and Central Elementary are what's considered by the state of Indiana Purple Star School. So I'll walk through a little bit of what that is. So the point of contact, that's me. And I went through some training, some online training to help support military families. Being, like I said, being a veteran, kind of understanding what it takes when kids are coming in and out of schools. I know that's very hard. I still have friends that are active duty and that have moved their families around, and how hard that is when people are deploying. I know we have a senior that has a senior and a freshman that their father's deployed right now. Those are hard times for kids. There's lots of different things that you can think of that go on in a school year. If those kids need support, that we would be there to help support them. So that's that for all the schools. I'm the point of contact. If there was anything to come up. We also had to have a dedicated website. We had one. It was very, very outdated. So we just kind of updated a little bit of the kind of language there, and then gave some connected resources there for people if they needed that. So we did that. One of the other parts was, this is kind of the most fun part, was hosting military events. I've been at, this is my 4th school, and South is definitely probably one of the more dedicated veterans to the veterans and to military service that I've been at. Just the legacy that people want to carry on. They want to show their pride in the United States, and then also show their pride for their veterans and military service members. Is so cool. The different things that we did, Fillmore's awesome services that they do, our high school program. We got like last fall we invited in Congressman Baird to talk to our students. What an awesome opportunity. And there's just more and more things that happen here at South that we're so excited about. And then we had to see that we had, like all of our decorations that we have up, and at first I thought, man, this is going to be hard. I'm going to kind of look through. I'll have to comb through some stuff. Maybe we'll have to put something up. Then kind of walking around the schools and just realizing all the different spaces that we have that recognize our veterans is so cool. And our dedicated art space here at Fillmore, that's the memorial wall. That's just if you haven't, I went up there one day in the summer and just kind of read through all that stuff. It's just very very neat area there, dedicated there at Fillmore. And then the last thing is these 5 members right here all had to kind of sign a board support, and then if military members, veterans, are qualified for a job, that we will at least give them an interview. That was part of that process. So we looked over the process, and this is what we went through. They signed it. I turned all that in late September. It took us a while to find out, and there was a part of me that was like, we didn't get it. What did I do? Did I not turn in? Did I not do something? And then one day, Dr. Smith called me kind of right before, I think it was the day before Veterans Day, and he was like, hey, we got it. And I was like, oh, nice, awesome. So I was really excited to do this. Obviously, it's near and dear to my heart, and I was really happy to do it. So if there is anything for veterans that we need, or for military service members, we're up to date and willing to help and ready to go the extra mile for those men and women. So, thanks so much.
And someone from Central.
Good evening. We wanted to take a moment to recognize our spell.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Our Spell Bowl boys and girls from Central and Fillmore. So if you'll come on up, our Central and Fillmore Spell Bowl teams. So on November 18th, we had our Spell Bowl at Central Elementary, and they put in a lot of work, a lot of time to be as part of our Spell Bowl team. They have to memorize over 750 words, and man almighty, some of these words. I had our teachers email me some of the words today to say, you know what, let's just say some of those words. And then I went, oh my goodness, I'm not sure I could pronounce some of those words. So we just wanted to say they did a great job. Fillmore had 2 teams. They had so many boys and girls that wanted to go out to be on the Spell Bowl team. So they actually had 2 teams. One of their teams actually won first place for their but we'll let Fillmore talk a little bit more about something that they did as they're piloting part of STEM with Mrs. Pruitt. So she'll talk a little more, and then our boys and girls will talk a little more about that. So Mrs. Pruitt, I'll let you.
I learned Mrs. Givney could not be here. She wants me to pass on her view. She's come down with pretty bad case of the flu, so she really hates missing. But she wanted me to pass on that she is very proud of all of our kiddos. We had both 4th and 5th grade teams. I'm blessed beyond my years to have the 5th graders as my homeroom class, and then the 4th graders are in my math. But these are an awesome group of young women and gentlemen, and I am going to have a couple of them speak, and we want Mrs. Pruitt, we want to make sure that we thank her for all she's done, and if she wants to say something maybe after they do about what the kiddos have done to make their shirts. So, right.
So we used a presser iron to make. So we decided to make letters on the back of our shirts to represent like kind of like jerseys how they have numbers. We decided to do letters, and we got our stuff from.
did you decide which letter to use on the back of your shirt?
Then can you fill in the gap a little bit, what we spell, if we were all here?
What would we spell?
In 2024, and they got to pick their own letters. So. All right, tell us what we got. So I'm Mrs. Pruitt. I'm the music teacher at Central and Fillmore, and then have been piloting the STEM program over at Fillmore, and been coaching the Spellbowl team, the past 4 or 5 years now, for quite a while. We were grateful enough to get 2 whole teams that had 16 members on each, and one of our teams placed first, and that's our second time in a row placing first. So no pressure next year. My 4th graders. So I've been going to some trainings over at Rolls Holman lately to try and get STEM a little bit more at Fillmore, and then growing up to Central in the middle and high school. And they gave me the opportunity this past year to be on one of their advisory boards, and they kind of like me, and so they've passed off some of their materials that they're not using or what they had bought, and it's not working like they had thought it would. So we have this big thing I'll work on in the spring. It's called a burn lab, kind of like the Glow Forge, but without a hood on it. That is an outside project, so you can set off the fire alarms. And then they had re-updated their Cricut products, so we inherited a cutter and a press, and they also sent over some materials. And one small part of what we are trying to work into Fillmore as well is hopefully a student store, and so making our own swag would be a part of it, and this was a way to start seeing how would that even possibly work. So I helped them out with a little bit more detailed pressing, like we need the patch and the arm to look really, really good, and then they got to use a T-square and figure out where the center of the back was and press their great big letters. That was also a little bit safer because that machine can get hot, and I don't want little tiny fingers getting burnt. So very carefully put it down, pick it up, back on the plate. So, yeah, that's what I've been doing. They're great kids. I am so lucky to work with them. It's just been a joy. So.
And before we go back to our seats, use your teacher voice to introduce yourselves. So we'll start over here.
My name is Quentin Woodward. And I'm in 5th grade. Hi, my name is Brandon Bruce, and I am 5th grade. Hi, my name is Anna Cash. Hi, my name is Emily Downey, and I'm in 5th grade. Hi, my name is Katie Jefferson, and I'm in 5th grade. Hi, my name is Sawyer McKee, and I'm in 4th grade. Hi, my name is Charlie Tumol, and I'm in 5th grade. Hi, my name is Michael Waters, and I'm in 5th grade.
Okay, and our 5th grade at Central, our tradition is to let our 5th graders design our shirts, and they get to pick, design the team. So one of our 5th graders, Lucas Watkins, actually designed our shirts, and so we have the design on the front and the back. And so my husband's company, Putnam, pays for our shirts, so saved our school a little money because they sponsored us. So we let the 5th graders design, and then the team votes on the shirt design we have. So that's sort of been the tradition at Central for 12, 15 years. How long we coach Bowl. And so we've done that, and we do want to recognize Peyton because he was a near perfect speller. So feeling this one more. On Spell Bowl last year. Did you have near perfect last year too?
No, I got 2.
Okay, he missed 2 last year. So hopefully he will continue next year in middle school. And our other, well, we want you in 5th grade. Others doing 6th grade. Mrs. Martin, you want to tell someone the ones? No.
You go right ahead. You're doing it.
Well, some of them that they didn't like was like floriferous, Vaccinia. What else did you guys not like to spell? Well, also, they all missed the first test, raspberry, because we don't hear what letter. Ducky. So they all missed raspberry on our practice test. So we practiced it again because the B is silent. That was a hard work for all of the kids. So
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming and being recognized.
And I would just like to let the board know that with Mrs. Pruitt and all that she's doing to get the schools and things STEM certified and whatever is amazing. She is truly an asset to our school corporation. So we're very thankful that we have her. Thank you.
Thank you all for being here and sharing. You may go home to dinner or homework or whatever if you would like.
I begged them. They're so good. You're my aide in my classroom for the next month.
Okay, that was fun. Financial update.
Yep. In your board packets, you received our latest financial reports through the end of the month of November. That included all the claim dockets, your payrolls, cash flows, transfers, and the fund reports. And we do continue to perform as forecasted regarding our income, our expenses, and our fund balances. Also this evening in the financial update, we welcome Barry Gardner from Policy Analytics. He's going to provide a report of the property tax analysis they did on behalf of South Putnam Community Schools. So Barry, go for it. Oh, yep, you need this. Right-hand side advances.
Well, thank you, and good evening to the board. Appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. So I guess, why are we here? What is Policy Analytics looking to do? We're here to help the school district and the leadership really understand some of the moving parts that are at play with your property tax revenue. Those impact your operations fund and your debt service fund, the ability to do projects, to pay for projects, and help be able to plan long term for the district in terms of some of those areas and what it's going to mean. Right? So our goal tonight is to try to bring a little bit of information around that, what levers get pulled, what it means, some legislative things to be looking out for as we get ready for an upcoming budget session, and really just help the district feel a little more informed about how your overall property tax kind of system works here. Policy Analytics has been around for about 20 years. We specialize in this area. So we work with cities, towns, the state of Indiana, and about 60 school districts across the state, helping them understand their assessed value composition, property tax revenue, cash flow forecasting. I spent 23 years in public education up until about 18 months ago, the last 10 in school finance. So this is an area that I really enjoy. I was reflecting a little bit tonight. I was at this place quite a bit from the early 2000s, but I think the last time I was here was in 2011 to watch the Speedway Spark Plugs get beat at a basketball game when I was athletic director there. So it was a little tough walking back in, but I managed in that piece. But yes, I've been out here quite a bit. Like I say, taught and coached at Speedway. Very familiar with the South Putnam area and being out here. So again, appreciate the opportunity. Feel free to ask questions as we go through this. It's a lot of information. A lot of rabbit holes we could go down. We'll try to stay pretty high level tonight, but more than happy for any kind of questions that may come up. So, one of the things that we start to look at is the makeup of the school district and some of the taxing districts actually that sit within inside this. So, what's outlined on the left-hand chart is the school district boundaries. And then the colors represent the different taxing districts that fall within school boundaries. So they, just like in a lot of school districts across the state, there is not one simple tax rate for South Putnam Community Schools or the community members that live within those school boundaries. They're defined by where they live, the townships, or some of the municipality areas within that. And then on the right-hand side, what you can see
is the rates for each of those townships. And so again, not every resident pays the same overall tax rate. And we call this chart really kind of an overlapping tax district, right? So you can see the school district's tax rate there in the middle. That teal color is $1.32. It's the same for every community member across the boundaries. What makes up the difference, you also have a county tax rate that's listed in there at 37 cents. There's some township tax rates, and the biggest difference really in that is if there's a municipal tax rate for a town or city within that. And so we see that kind of in that Cloverdale, Warren Township area. It's going to bring in that municipal rate, and then the Fillmore town. And so that's where we start to see the different stacked rates. So again, taxpayers may have different tax bills and different tax rates depending on where they live. Okay? So that's one of the pieces we want to look at, because that tax rates, it's a multiplication problem really at the end of the day with revenue. The tax rates, we say tax rates times your assessed value is going to determine the revenue that starts to come towards the school district, right? So that $1.32 specifically for the school district times some assessed value is what really generates that. The next area we start to look at that really has some impact is what is the assessed value composition of the district? What are you made up of? Because we have different property tax classes. If you're familiar with the act when Mitch Daniels was governor, the 1, 2, and 3% property tax caps, right? So we have the classifications around that. That residential homeowners can only pay 1% of the gross assessed value of their home. Apartments and farmland are capped at 2%, and then businesses are capped at 3%, right? And once they hit that cap, they can't pay any more in property taxes. This is one of those things that we start to look at. You do not have really any homeowners. It's very few that are actually at that cap. Most of them pay much less than the cap, and that's really two reasons. One, you have some really overall low total tax rates. Most of your tax rates are below $2 overall. That means it's about $2 that we start to see circuit breaker maybe come into the picture. The other is you have a very diverse composition. Where we see things like tax caps happen is when you're very residential. Okay? You have a really diverse base, and you can see that you're about 55% residential. You've got a pretty strong component of agriculture, or farmland, that plays into your assessed value, and then personal property, we call it. Personal property is the equipment inside of a business. So the pieces of equipment, the machinery inside of a business is taxed as a component, and that has its own classification, right? And that's a pretty big classification here within that. So one, we call this really diverse. That's good for the community because it's going to help generate a solid revenue source without putting as much pressure on homeowners. And so that's a positive when we really see this. Most of the districts we work with across the state are closer to about 70% residential. Again, so more of that's going to fall on the homeowner. The other reason we want to look at this chart is because of some legislative pieces being discussed that may have some impact on revenue moving forward. Okay? One of those is agriculture. Okay? I'm going to show a chart here in a second, but farmland specifically has its own specific calculation, and right now it's increasing pretty dramatically. It has the last couple of years, and again, I'll show that here in a second, and it's projected to increase. Farm Bureau has already started lobbying down at the State House about an adjustment to that calculation. Right? The easiest way to explain that calculation, it's based on what farmers can rent the farmland for as part of a rent situation, or the revenue generated by farms, really commodity prices. Well, farmers are pushing back, and rightfully so in some ways, that commodity prices were higher 3 or 4 years ago. They've come down, but now the calculation is going up. And so they're paying more in taxes while the commodity prices have come down, and it's not a timely system and needs adjustment. So we could see some sort of legislative change there. That came out in a recent report by a state and local tax review committee. The other is personal property. Personal property right now, is allowed to be depreciated down to a 30% floor. So if a new piece of equipment comes in, it's worth $100, right? You can depreciate that down to $30 and only be taxed on that $30 over a period of years. They're talking about removing that $30 floor, that it could be depreciated all the way down to zero. The other that they're talking about is the fact that right now, up to $80,000 doesn't even have to be reported. So if you have personal equipment inside your business, it's only $75,000. You don't even have to report it for tax purposes. They're talking about raising that to $2 or $3 million. So that would exempt a lot of personal property, right? So if that personal property, all of a sudden they make, let's use that example. If they make that change and they say, okay, you don't have to, you can depreciate it all the way down, or you can exempt a lot more, that means that piece of the pie is going to get smaller. Okay? But you still need, as the school district, the same amount of revenue to pay your bonds and for your operations fund. So what happens to the other pieces of pie? They get bigger. And so that's one of the things that we start talking about with districts to be aware of is that could potentially cause homeowner tax bills to go up, farmland to go up, business tax bills to go up, or even your overall tax rate. Right now we're kind of at that $1.32. The mechanics of it could cause your tax rate to go up with you not doing anything different, right? And a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns right now. We haven't started the legislative session, and I always tell people I got a crystal ball. It's just really cloudy because we just don't know, right? So what we do know is those two areas were cited in a recent report that we want to keep an eye on. So we're trying to create a little bit of a baseline for the district here, right? And we're going to talk about how we use those projections. Personal property is an interesting one. You can see it jumped quite a bit from last year to this year, right? Yeah.
Can I ask you,
Yes.
would that be?
I hope somebody else here could pronounce for it. It looks like poet bio.
Yeah. Okay. That's.
Yes.
I assume that's.
Yes. Their personal property from 24 to 25 went up about $100 million. So again, it sounds like they must have now had some equipment come into that. Now that's
they closed for a while.
Okay, and closing that piece.
Not producing as
Okay.
I believe.
So if they have had an influx of that reportable personal property, again, it's a double-edged sword because we will start to potentially see that $100 million component start to come down because they're able to depreciate that down that 30%. Over the next 5 to 6 years, it'll go from 100 to down to 30. And that impacts that percentage. So what we would see over that time is that personal property start to get a little smaller, right? So those are some of the moving parts within this. But yeah, great question. We kind of dug into that as well. When we talk about assessed value assumptions, so as we try to project this forward for the district, this is this current farmland calculation. Okay, and a lot of numbers here. We're sitting, so we're over here. Oh, it's not working on the screen. I apologize. Right now at the 2280, there is the current per acre amount when it comes to assessed value for a piece of farmland. Okay, and that's what they use as the basis to tax farmland. You can see from 2022, that figure was only $1,290. So it's gone up almost $1,000 per acre over the last 3 years. And you can see what it's projected to do the next few years, right? If you go to the far left-hand side of the chart, from 2012 to 2015, you see that little incline? When we got to 2015, that was my first year in school finance, they decided that increase was too much, and they needed to make a legislative change, and they changed the calculation. So we can only expect, when we look at the data on the right-hand side of this chart, they're going to want to change the calculation and adjust it, right? And I'm not saying they shouldn't. It's not an opinion whether they should or should not. It's a reality, and it's the impact it could have on the district because you have quite a bit of farmland. So if they begin to change that, again, going back to this piece of pie, if I can get back there, that may start to get smaller, right? And again, so that it all comes down to who's helping bring the dollars to the table to generate those revenues, right? And so those are the things we want to monitor as we look at the legislative session. So we project out assessed value for the school district, and we've actually looked at this two ways. We have looked at what we've called our baseline assumptions. So we look at residential data, we look at your personal property data, we look at the farmland. Our software has every single piece of property in the South Putnam and every school district's piece of property inside the school boundaries and the last 15 years worth of data. and we're using that then to help us project forward. So this is down in the weeds, really projections. The blue line is if we kept this chart, back to it, I'm going to figure out where I'm saying, this chart the same. If we didn't make any changes, the blue line represents what the assessed value growth projections would be. In the green, we've said we're going to keep the 2025 number the same and not allow it to increase. And say, what does that do to your assessed value? And it creates about a little over 0.5% drag on your assessed value. So that's our first indicator, right, that if we see changes in your farmland or your personal property, it is going to impact AV growth over the next few years, which impacts capacities, which could impact kind of rate possibilities, right? So that's the piece within it. It looks a little easier, maybe, depending on your point of view, in this scenario. So the orange is where we see the district's assessed value growth over the next few years in the orange. That's the baseline if we're including the farmland calculation. The green is when we pull that out, and you can see there's much lower growth projections. We've also got a little bit of things we're working with out here, right? Because we've had a change. Talking with Dr. Smith, I think part of the reason we started getting engaged was there was some assessed value in the system that hadn't been properly kind of assessed and calculated, and they're doing a little bit of a catch-up. Right? They brought in county brought in a third party and realized they'd underassessed some properties over the years, and they're doing a bit of a catch-up, right? So that's part of the reason we see this. One of the teal big bar here in 2025, this 23%, is they're doing this catch-up because they've underassessed properties for a number of years. The other factor, really two factors we have going into this, home prices. Our assessed value system is what we call market-based. So as home prices increase, so does the assessed value of a home or the homes around it. If you think of what's happened the last couple of years around the state of Indiana, the country with home prices, dramatic 15-20% increases in home prices each year over the last couple of years. That's playing into this data. And then your farmland calculation playing into this data, right? So we've got a lot of factors. And I think one of the things that we've talked a little bit about is there's still maybe a little bit of that underassessment still working itself out of the system, right? Because I think, again, trying to, be fair, there was so much potentially that was underassessed to drop it all in 1 year may have been too much, and so it may be a smoothing out over the next couple of years, right? So we've talked about kind of sitting down with the assessor to adjust these projections a little bit more after the kind of first of the year to better understand. And what we're not seeing right now currently is that home prices are slowing down. There's still about a 5 to 6% change in the median sales price across the state in 2024. And the way our assessed value system works is sales that happen in 2024 get assessed in 2025 and will be a part of the school's budget in 2026. Okay, so we already kind of sense what 2026s would look like. And when we look at Putnam County, we can't drill down specifically to the South Putnam borders, but when we look at Putnam County, 2024 median sales price up, I think I checked earlier, was up about 15% year over year. So again, we still have this pressure of home prices working through. So why do you see us projecting still 8 and 7% growth? Is because some of those factors playing in, right? But we want to be conservative as you plan out your debt and you work with your financial advisors on the debt side that if they make some legislative changes, you may not see that growth, right? So there's a lot riding on this legislative session that can have impact within that we want to be aware of. Questions about ADAT? I know it's a lot of information within that. I'll pause there just a second. The only other piece I think that is important as you manage a tax rate, right, is your operations fund tax rate. It is not one that you technically really control. Okay? The way that the operations fund grows by what we call the maximum levy growth quotient. That's called the MLGQ. This last year and this year, it's been 4%. That's set by the state. Okay? There's a calculation that goes into that. The way your operations fund tax rate works is, if you look at that, let's just use the 5% because there's a nice white line, right? Let's say if the MLGQ was 5%. If your assessed value is 8.3% or above that line, your operations fund rate automatically goes down. You don't control that. It's just the math behind it, right? If it's less than the 5%, like the 3% there, your operations fund rate goes up. So as we manage to an overall rate, we have to keep that in mind. Depending on where AV comes in, that's going to cause fluctuation, and then determines how much debt service capacity you have. And you keep managing to that overall $1.32 rate, right? So that's the other piece we're going to continue monitoring in this, because it does impact those rates for you within that. So the last piece, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you, but this really is kind of the essence of our work and the product that we produce for the district and for Dr. Smith and for the financial advisors is, if you keep your debt service rate at the $1.32, we call that a fixed total rate scenario. What does that mean in terms of revenue for the school district in your two funds, right? So if I'm going to start at the bottom, and it's a little small, if you look at the very bottom, you can see the operations fund rate continues to decline. So it's going to go from 68 cents to 59 cents. Why? Because your assessed value went up 23%, right? That drives that ops rate down. But in future years, again, we projected to drop to 56 cents, down to 55. And so when we do that, and you go up to the debt service rate, then we're pushing that up into the debt service rate to manage to that $1.32. What that does, then when you look across the certified levy line, is increases your debt service levy on an annual basis, right? Why is that important? Is when you have additional dollars in the debt service, that allows you some additional capacity to maintain your buildings through projects, whether that be roofs, sidewalks, HVAC, boilers, for the projects I know you're doing here around the district. Payment capacity, you can sometimes pay back things faster, needs less interest cost. It's a lower cost overall, which is a positive piece, but it just gives you some capacity that doesn't happen if your rate is declining within that situation, right? The other piece and why this is important, why we want to watch this, is if your operations, if they make any changes, right, in terms of legislative pieces, and maybe that causes your operation fund rate to go up. The district may be forced with saying, do we stay at the $1.32? That's going to mean less capacity in the debt service, less ability to do projects, to pay back bonds, or do we need to move that rate from $1.32 to maybe $1.35, right? And not promoting one way or the other, I think it's the decisions that could potentially come and how you're managing this, and how you're trying to look forward to future tax rates, right? And so we really viewed this with Dr. Smith as a baseline to kind of get a sense of where the district's at, better understand kind of what's happening with the assessed value, especially because of the underassessment playing, the farmland piece, the personal property. Start to do some projections that we can sit down with the financial team, and then really be prepared when the legislative session happens here in a couple of weeks, get started. What kind of bills do we begin to see out there? What do we start to hear, and what impact that may have? Now that we have your model built, then we can start to put in some of those scenarios and basically produce a new model that shows those impacts on these funds, right? One of the proposals that's been floated again, floated 2 years ago, is moving all schools' operations fund rates down to 40 cents. Okay? Representative Jeff Thompson, who's the chairman of House Ways and Means, has said that school districts' debt service rate should really be no more than 80 cents and your operations fund no more than 40 cents. Your operations right now is 59 cents. So the way they proposed it last time is over an 8-year period, they would slowly work down your operations fund rate. What's that mean? That's revenue. It's really going to, at the most part, flatline your revenue or really bring down your revenue while your expenses continue to increase, right? So those are the proposals we want to keep an eye on, because again, then if you have less money in the operations fund, what's that mean in terms of taking care of your buildings, bus purchases, all those kind of pieces, and how's the district look to maneuver moving forward? Some districts purchase buses out of debt, so do you look to shift some of those pieces, right? All those really in the weeds kind of conversations. We don't know yet, so I don't predict, but I think those are the things we want to watch for, and I think that's our next phase with the district, is start to see what happens in the legislative session. We're ready to run those and have conversations with Dr. Smith, the financial team, to kind of say, hey, here's what you're looking at. So you as a board then feel like you have the information you need to make informed decisions. If there are changes, you can at least maybe able to speak to those changes and what's going on in terms of revenue or tax rates. Just, I think, hopefully feel more confident about kind of the financial changes that I just think we're going to see one way or the other. So I think that's my last slide. I'm more happy to take any questions. I know it's
What kind of foresight do you have into community projects and development that might take, renovation businesses, things like that, or new companies that might be coming up on the zoning board, or their farmland might be converted into using that farmland for something else. Some of those things have to go through, zoning boards and things like that. What kind of tools do you have to keep an eye on those sorts of things to kind of help schools, especially schools like us, primarily farmland and residential, to kind of keep an eye on what might be coming on the horizon in the next 2 years?
It's a great question. One really is the communication with the school district, right? So when we sit down and we start to have some of these conversations, we'll talk about, do you know of anything that's potentially coming on? Right? 'Cause it's hard to project, honestly, across a school district unless we're handed some knowledge what new business may be coming in. And the hard part mathematically is to understand that Starbucks or a gas station popping up on the corner is not going to impact any of this, right? It's got to be $100 million of personal property coming in that starts to come in, and that's a lot of assessed value, right? If you think of a home, assessed value is $200,000. How many homes that would take to generate that, right? So oftentimes, the things that come in are not material in terms of moving the needle and the rounding errors, to be perfectly honest. Unless you know of a major corporation that's looking to come in and settle and we want to monitor, right? So that's the piece where we would solicit information from the district, and then we can, based on that information, begin to model that in. We do that a lot of times with residential districts, a lot of homes coming in. Again, I think one of the things we'll continue to monitor is your personal property, because we do know there's going to be some depreciation there within that. That's what's modeled in. So it's a balance. I mean, I wish we had that crystal ball, but it's really the communication with the local units and seeing what would have material impact on your assessment.
Yeah, but I mean, that's exactly kind of what I was thinking. Like, there's not a lot that's going to tip the scale unless it's something like a solar farm or something like that. If you've driven around the community, you've probably seen the no solar farm signs. And that's kind of it hasn't really been a conversation for us, but I can tell you in the future it probably will be, because there are things going on that are in our in our zones, in Jefferson Township that would really, if it happens like they say, it could really affect us and increase that AV.
Well, let's talk about it. It's a great point. I'm glad I used to be a school CFO, because I'm glad bringing lots of bad news and always telling people, no, not really. But that's a little bit of the case here, because oftentimes I think you have to watch a solar farm comes in, right? Have they abated it, right? So sometimes to get that investment, a local government will abate, which means they don't have to pay property taxes for up to 10 years. They usually phase that off. Well, at the same token, they're able, from a tax standpoint, to depreciate that down to a 30% floor. So what are you left with at the end of the day? It's
What's
probably
the real story?
Yeah, what's the real story? The other one, if you've seen anything in the news, there's lots of talk about data centers coming into the state of Indiana. Facebook, Google, $800 million data centers coming in. It will have about $50 million in 10 years of actual taxable property. Because servers are personal property, and the state can give a 40-year exemption on personal property, so they won't pay personal property on what the value is. So we see this huge headline, and the actual tax benefit is very little, right? So it's hard to say that's the case with every situation, but I think in our world, we start to caution people from seeing headlines. That's what we're here for. That's when we can come in and run some analysis. We've done it with wind farms in northern Indiana, right? People see that. Lots of assessed value, but it has abated. It's come down. Had some impact, but not a lot. So, but that's great information that we can share. And if we hear those coming in, we can model that, those pieces out. That's the word of caution, I guess I would hear. What's the real story, as you said, behind what it will actually generate? Doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad project, or those things are not positive things for an area. it's what's the impact, I guess, for you all is a different story.
So in regards to the budget that we're passing in January for the new budget, or this year's budget?
We're done.
Next year's budget, whichever year. You know what I mean? If there are huge legislative changes, how far out are we okay with what we have or what we're planning right now?
That's a really good question. The legislative body, so they can always kind of do what they want, right? So there's always that. But more than likely, our projection is the first time you would see impact from this legislative session is budget year, calendar year 2027. Okay? And the reason for that is the legislative body is meeting in the spring of 25. Laws go into effect July 1 of 25. County assessors are supposed to release their assessment figures by August 1 of 2025. That's not a whole lot of time and window to change up calculations and recalculate assessed value. Schools have also been pushing back that, hey, we need some time to plan for this. So again, we may not be against it, but give us time. So that's where we're leaning into. The earliest we would probably see things is 2027. So it does give us time, and that's why we're trying to work with districts, right? We'll see what things happen this spring. We come together in the summer of 25 and have some time to start planning around what these impacts may be as you plan your 27 really budget. So that's at least why we're reading the tea leaves right now. Yeah, it's a great question. Other. Thank you. Yeah, no, we appreciate the opportunity, and look forward to continue work.
Well, thanks.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, legislative update, Joe?
I don't have much of an update other than I want to remind you guys that as I mentioned, I think passing before, I won't be volunteering to be the legislative liaison next year. So if somebody want to take a look at that between now and the next meeting and see if it's something you want to do. I'm just not going to have the time that I used to have. That's about it.
That and from what Barry just said, you might want to pay attention to our ISA or ISBA, legislative update.
And ISBA does a really good job of kind of laying it out there, especially when the session starts. They have their top priorities, and they track all these bills, and you get a really nice summary if you dive into those ISBA updates. So there's really not a whole lot to the legislative liaison role, except we want to try to always have representation at the House Day, ISBA House Day, and be part of those conversations. Also, I thought it was interesting to be a delegate as well during the ISBA session where we're the conference when we're there and looking at what the next projected priority is going to be for the ISBA themselves and what they're going to push for and lobby for. So it's really good to be involved with that. But I recommend somebody take that on.
Thank you, Joe. All right, project update. Doug Rambo from MTS. Thank you for being here, Doug.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate the soapbox. As you probably have noticed, the site's been a little quiet the last week. Not the greatest thing on the planet, but things are moving in the right direction. The Randac repairs are finished. We're doing some helical piles, so most of the vibration is going to be done. We're not going to be seeing any more of that, and that'll be for the field house. Coming up for the new year, that's where it's really going to be getting wild out there. There's going to be a lot of concrete poured, a lot of rebar going in, and pretty sure metal building going up. So we're going to start. Guys from Peterson did a calculation for tailings and whatnot that they're going to need for the Central Elementary asphalt work. So they're not going to remove all the tailings from the Randac procedure. So they're going to move some over to the central area around the tree line, and then get rid of the rest of the tailings. So that was finished this week. We're moving it next week. And get into the pool after that. Right now, we're still submittals and RFIs going through. The roofs were completed this week finally. All the punch lists, SPG finished it. The mechanical contractor came back and hooked up a couple of the line sets that had to get removed to get the flashing correct for the warranty. So JM's going to be coming out next week, and so is Danny Howell's representing technical insurance, and we'll do the final walkthrough of that, and we'll start close out on that in the new year. Some other odds and ends at the field and the softball field. We're going to be still working on the gravel stop. There's some steel that's still coming in for that. And then on the softball field, we're going to revamp because there's a couple deep ruts going through the infield. So we have the product out behind. It's over the tree line now. It's just it's a blended dirt for basically softball and baseball infields. So Connexco's going to be spreading that around the softball field. I'm hoping we get something this week, but we're a little bit idle right now as well. So if not, it'll be ready to the new year, and softball field will be ready to roll for the season. Any questions? Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Public comments? Item 7, new business.
Yeah, so we are, now that Chartwells has been selected and approved by the DOE and South Putnam schools to serve as our new food service management company. It starts in January 25. We are seeking approval of the food service PTO payout resolution to allow us to pay out the remaining pay time off of the food service workers who stayed employed through the end of the calendar year. Of note, there were several terminations on the consent agenda this evening, reflecting those positions that are being ended, and then they have been offered positions, and they are going through an onboarding tomorrow, actually. So that's why that was terminated. Not on their air, but on us having to terminate those positions by the end of the year so they can start with the new employer at the beginning of the year. So just wanted to make sure that I made that point. Again, no error on their part for the termination. It's just the positions were being terminated. And so we just need that PTO payout resolution approved so we can pay those that stuck around to the end.
I move to approve the food services PTO payout resolution. I'll second it.
Joe made the motion to approve food service PTO payout resolution. Wade seconded it. All those in favor? Carries. Item B, consideration of CES, FES, and SPNSHS surplus.
Yeah, we put those all in one tonight, rather than have three different votes. So we just packaged them all together. They're all in your board package, the things that we're surplusing for Central Elementary, Fillmore, and the high school and middle school. We're just asking approval of those so we can start the process of removing them from the district.
I was just going to say, I like that they're cleaning things up. I've been in the building. Trouble stuff I saw.
I move to approve the combined surplus.
I'll second.
Joe made the motion to approve all schools surplusing. We seconded that. All those in favor? Carries. Thank you. Other business? Report.
I'll try to be brief tonight. There's a few things I need to make you aware of. We completed the purchase of the property at 203 South Main Street in Fillmore on Friday. We've begun the process of investigating the next steps of the property and some of the initial cleanup processes that will take place next spring and into, well, some of us beginning now, but all the way through the summer of next year to be completely ready to go for start of school next year. We may be able to speed that process up, but we're in that beginning process right now. It's going to be a great addition for Fillmore. They just had their Christmas program for the preschoolers the other day. There are cars everywhere, so this will be a great add-on and a benefit for enhanced parking at Fillmore. Very excited about that. Also, as mentioned above, we're excited to be moving forward with Chartwells as our new food service management company in January. They've been a very good partner so far, and we look forward to amazing things as we move into the next semester. Also want to recognize our food service staff and the hard work they put in and day out. Most days it's a very thankless job, but they do a great job for us, and looking to see many of them coming on board with Chartwell's moving forward and seeing those faces again. Next, I also want to give a huge shout out to Lori Young, who is our current food services director. She's carried our food service department for many, many years and done it amazingly well. She's also helped facilitate this amazing RFP and bid process for this for Chartwell's to come on board. And she's overseeing this transition and getting ready for January. She's been working a lot trying to get this to go very, and it's been extremely smooth because of her efforts. So I just want to big shout out to her as she transitions into her new role at the district. And then last but not least, we wrap up first semester on Friday, and I want to wish everyone a safe and happy holiday break.
I would like to give a shout out to our stereotypes, who I kind of roped him into hauling some things to the art department. So anyway, it was kind of some heavy stuff. So I just appreciate him doing that, going over and above a little bit. Anyway, so if there's nothing else, we will adjourn. All right.